go from Gaziantep, a city flooded with refugees because of the war in neighbouring Syria. More refugees live in Turkey than in any other country in the world, but it's far from the only nation taking people in. The UN Refugee Agency estimates nearly 30,000 people a day flee their homes because of conflict and persecution. And nowhere is that more evident than in Syria, Iraq and Yemen. Let's take a look at the numbers. More than 3 million Iraqis have been displaced since the start of 2014. Of those, 1.3 million live in camps in Iraq, and another 260,000 are refugees in other countries. More than 13 million people in Syria are in need of aid. That includes more than 6 million internally displaced people. Another 5.4 million have fled Syria since the start of the war. More than 22 million people in Yemen are in need of aid in what's been called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Of those, more than 7 million people don't have enough to eat, and more than 700,000 have been diagnosed with cholera. Now, we'll hear soon from our reporters on the ground in Jordan, Iraq and Yemen. But first, let's look at Turkey. We visited one of the refugee camps on its border with Syria. This is a camp just outside of Nizip, near the Turkey-Syria border. Almost 4,000 people call this place home. Many of them have been here for several years. They're some of the more than 3 million Syrian refugees currently living in Turkey. But many of the people here would prefer to return to Syria if they could. This is a clean camp, it's organised, but it's still not a life these people have chosen. Many of the men have jobs where they go into the surrounding towns and cities, but these are low-skilled, low-paying jobs, and everyone here only receives 100 Turkish lira a month. That's about 25 US dollars. As I said, many people hope to return to Syria. In fact, some of them have. But now we're going to go and meet Jinan. She's been here for 5 years with her 6 children, just to talk about what life is really like.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank God everything is provided for us, food vouchers and basic needs. But we hope and pray that the war will be over soon and we return to Syria. We want to return because our families and relatives are there. Our land is there. Everything that's ours and dear to us is there in Syria.
And why is it so important for you to return home?
My kids don't know anyone living in Syria. We speak to our relatives only on the phone. We don't see them. The kids don't know their grandparents or uncles living there.
Okay, bye. So Jinan's story is one of many and one of hope, despite now almost 7 years of war. Jordan also hosts a large number of Syrian refugees. More than 500,000 have been registered there, and that's not counting those who haven't officially put their names down. Francis Collins visited Zatari refugee camp, a sprawling city home to about 80,000 people.
Officially in this country there are something like 600,000 Syrian refugees. Unofficially, according to the Jordanian government, there could be up to 1.4 million Syrian refugees. Now, this camp doesn't look too great. You can hear generators everywhere. It is jerry-built. There are baked clay roads, but compared to how it was, things are improving here. If you come here 4 years ago, it would have been just tents. People have told us, you know, we were given a tent, it then blew down the next day and we had to start again, and we simply had to start building. And that's what they've done here. There is the semblance of a society. Bear in mind as well that the Syrians are trading people, they're industrious people. Let's just show you the main street here, because as far as the eye can see in that direction, you can see shops selling just about everything. Now, there are bicycles being sold, there are kiddies' toys, there is food, there are clothes. A lot of people come here and they walk around and they trade. So there is something of a society here. But bear in mind as well that these are displaced people. They're mainly from the Deraa region of Syria, and it was in Deraa that the conflict started in April 2011. Those you speak to say we want to go home at some stage, but what they're really certain of is that they don't know when they can go back to their home region, when they can go back just 15, 20 kilometres over the border to Syria. Now, there's been a big funding push by the United Nations in the last few months. They want to raise something like £4 billion over the next few months to fund refugee camps, not just here, but as I say, in Lebanon and Turkey and across the region, and to try and help and raise the standard of living for the 5 million Syrian refugees who are scattered. essentially, this is their life. This is where they live and they work. This is their street, and this for now is their home.
Yemen is becoming known as the world's forgotten conflict. We're going now to Taiz, where rebel forces are blocking almost all entrances to this frontline city, all except one, which is where Middle East reporter Abu Bakr al-Shamahi went to see firsthand the humanitarian disaster unfolding.
This is the road to the city at the front line of Yemen's war. There's now only one route to Taiz, with a dry riverbed and a mountain road along the way. What was once a 2-hour trip now takes over 6. But it's still a lifeline for the city's people. Every other road is controlled by Houthi rebels, who have imposed a blockade for over 2 years. Taiz used to be Yemen's second most populated city, but now more than half the people have fled. It's in the hospitals, the few that are left, where you see the human impact of this war. Yaqub cradles her baby, one of Yemen's 3.3 million acutely malnourished children. She's struggling to cope.
He's 4 months old and his development's slow. He only weighs 2 kilograms. He's not getting any bigger. He's like a newborn.
It's not just the children who are suffering. In the Al-Muzaffar hospital's crowded wards, we find Hafiza and her husband Sadiq. Hafiza has kidney failure, but can't find treatment.
My husband doesn't have a job. We are tired. We live in the ruins of a school. We need money for treatments. We need help. Help us. The transport for the dialysis treatment costs about $5 and we can't afford it.
Living in war-torn Taiz means that Hafiza is running out of hope. A rubbish dump in front of a hospital isn't what patients expect when they come to be treated. But this is a new normal in Taiz. The staff here work under difficult conditions for little pay in a hospital that hasn't been spared the fighting. One of the patients staff are treating is 15-year-old Abir. A Saudi coalition airstrike hit near her school. Her father said that the shock had made her pre-existing health conditions worse. She now can't walk or talk.
We come 20 kilometers from our village in the mountains to give her an injection and then go back. We haven't got the money to take her abroad for treatment, but she desperately needs it.
Abir never got to travel abroad. On the day we were set to meet her in her village, we received heartbreaking news from her father. Abir had passed away. Abu Bakr al-Shamahi, TRT World, Taiz.
Iraq has declared victory over Daesh, but its refugee camps remain. Many of the people who fled the fighting ended up at Barhaka camp, one of the larger camps in northern Iraq. And as Ash Gallagher reports, it's having a hard time caring for them.
I'm here in northern Iraq at Barhaka camp, where many people are still surviving. The government of Iraq says the war against Daesh is over in the country. But as you can see, there are many people who are still not able to go home. The UN estimates at least 3 million people are still displaced. At least 600,000 of them are from West Mosul. Their homes are under rubble, and for many of them, they lost their loved ones. Now, here at the camp, the conditions are actually deteriorating. Many of the tents, as you can see, are torn apart, and it actually floods when it rains. Most people will need heat, blankets, and warm clothes for the winter. The UN is hoping to bring kits into the camps and across the country for people to be able to survive. In a high desert environment like this, the temperatures can actually drop below 0 at night. There is a lot to do over the next few months while it gets colder for people who need to be able to get through. However, the government of Iraq is actually hoping that most people will go home by the elections, which are scheduled for May. That means a mass movement of people in just under 6 months. But the UN also says that people won't go home if they can't trust the security forces.
As always, it's the civilians caught in the crossfire who bear the biggest burden in these conflicts. Countries taking in refugees do their best, but the UN says a global response is required. That's it from us in Gaziantep. Thanks for watching.